Alright, welcome back to the shop. I have a little project here. I've already taken this part of a project apart. You may recognize this from a other segment. And here's all the pieces of this puzzle. So, what I'm going to do is clean things up a little bit. Wipe the loose grease off, inspect these parts. Make sure they're good to go back into the project that I'm working on. So when you do this, you just look for any hairline cracks in anything, whatnot, wiping it all down. Look inside the bearing races for any scoring. Everything looks good. Some good clean parts. Just had grease on them. Okay, so there's the gear part. Pretty well wiped down and cleaned up good enough. I mean, this is going to go back in and get packed in grease again, so this is good. This shaft, you can see, is already cleaned up pretty well. Pretty happy with that. I'd actually worked on that a little bit before. I took everything apart. So this, we cleaned up one. I'm going to wire wheel it now. Do that off camera. Okay, so that's wire wheeled. We cleaned up one just like this on a previous segment. This one's okay. Screwdriver will go in. We don't have to clean that one up. So that's done. This is a needle bearing, and this is why the shaft is clean. I'll just inspect them this way. I'll put them in and I'll just visually see. I don't think you're going to see it, but I'll visually check and make sure the segments are turning, which they are indeed. So that feels nice on there. So I think we can let that go. And then these bearings here, this guy, nice and clean. You load it and it feels good. So this is all ready to go back together, and we'll do that here in a second. So I just want to show quick one of the ways I was experimenting with cleaning up some of these bearings. There's some old dried up grease in them, and what I'll do is fill up the palm of my hand with some light oil and then just rotate these a bunch, and you can see you get a fair amount out. In fact, I did one earlier and it had a whole bunch of little chunks of stuff. Experimentation. I don't know, we'll see how it works in the long run. Alright, so there we go. There's a nice cleaned up bearing. It's new departure 3201. That's it's an old bearing. It's got a lot of hours on it, I'm sure, but it feels great, so I'm not going to replace it. Plus it's fairly easy to get to, so I'm not going to worry about it that much. So this bearing goes in here. You always try and put your wording outwards. This shaft goes in this way. This will go in here. Then the bearing goes in here. So we'll put all this together and see what we get. So I like to put all the wording outwards. Then if I have it apart again or somebody else takes it apart, they can see the wording. Here's a Torrington bearing. It's a B78 needle bearing. So what we'll do is we'll line that up here. And we're flat on the bench here. I normally don't like hitting on the steel bench because it can mess things up. So we'll put it on this rag. So when you do this, you find that sockets are your friend. I normally use various size sockets for the size the OD of the bearing that I'm putting in. But in this instance, I'm just going to use this and tap as flat as I can. Normally goes in pretty easy. There is a collar in here that this seats against, so we don't want to go crazy, but we'll get that close. I think I could go just a little bit more. Don't want to pound the heck out of that. Okay, so there you go. You can see that's that's seated up in there pretty good. So now we can put this together in here like that, and that'll ride on there like that. So now this I'm going to sit in another socket. This one was customly turned down to go into axle for a trailer, but that's okay. We just need the dead space in here to work on. So we'll put that like that. Start our bearing down on there, and then we have another socket that is right on the OD of that bearing, and now we're just going to tap the whole thing down. When it sounds solid, you're in. You hear the pitch change there. So there we go, we're in. We might have to give this a little tap back in. There we go. Spins great. Nice and cleaned up. Ready to go back into the tool. Oh, yeah, right. So this piece will go on here. It retains this whole assembly together by screwing into this. And then there's a bushing that this rides on in its other race. I believe there's another needle bearing for right here, but we'll see that when that project comes about. So there's just a little quick reassembly of some of the components of a project. Alright, so what we'll do before we put this back together is we will pack this with grease. We're not going to go crazy with it, but we'll just make sure we get some in it. We don't want it to be running dry. We cleaned it with oil, and then we blew all that out. So I just kind of work it in there a little bit. This is always a mess. No clean way of doing this. But we'll just make sure we get some packed in, and then when it seems like it's all the way down, you can tell it stops going. And I'd say we're about there. Alright. Greased. Try not to get too much grease in this whole thing. Alright, let's set that there. Alright, so what this goes into is this housing, which is already cleaned up. Sits in here like this. This goes in here. And what we'll do is take a brass hammer again, drive this down until the pitch changes. You can hear it change. Verify that everything's still spinning freely, which it is. Now, of course, we have a little bit of a grease mess here. Push some out with you. So let's get that kind of cleaned up. Alright, and our screw. Recognize this screw here. This is the one we cleaned up with the the Dremel tool. And we don't get to use it a whole lot, but there it is, the large 1/2-inch screwdriver. This is appropriate to use for this setting. We want the biggest screwdriver we can find to fit in the screw. Okay, so that's snug. And we'll double check everything's still working the way it should. Oh yeah, that's nice. Okay, so then, I'm not going to assemble this, but there will be a motor. Here's the motor. This has been cleaned up. New bearings have been put in this. This bushing goes here. And this part of it rides right here. You can even see where the bushing had been sitting. This will go in here like this. It's got indexing right there. That would sit just like that. I don't want to force it in because I might not get it out real easy. But there you go, you can see, even with it sticking far out, it's still matching up with the gears. So, there we go. Some progress on a project. Nice new bearings in the back. These were completely wasted, these bearings. Got new ones, put them on, cleaned the commutator up, cleaned and revarnished the rotor here, sealed everything up, cleaned up all the aluminum housing. So this is going to be ready to go into that project when we get there. Thanks for watching.